So we're continuing on in our message series, Made for People. So if you haven't seen the earlier videos, sorry, you'll have to come back next year or next time we do this. I don't know. Where we learned about how the Bible says that God's design for us is to be a people. And first week we went through just a lot of passages. You got a biblical theology, okay? And that requires closeness, which requires vulnerability, okay? Which is being real about yourself rather than wearing a mask. And so the sophomores did a mask skit last week. And we also looked at John chapter 4, where we saw how God enables us to get deeper because he did it first. And so we're actually building, and so each week we're kind of building on the skills that are necessary in order to be the people that God calls us to be. But even if we're able to make friends now by being vulnerable and getting deeper, that brings up the question raised in the video. How do we sustain friendships for the long haul? So can friendships be forever? And that is the main idea for today. Another word for it is covenant, which is required for long-term relationships. So covenant is a really outdated word, and it means to make an agreement or to promise or just commitment. And I'll actually use covenant and commitment kind of interchangeably from now on. Our culture doesn't like commitment, right? It doesn't like commitment. We don't like covenant either. But it is a very important word in the Bible, and one story that highlights that is the story of David and Jonathan, King Saul's son Jonathan, all right? And so very famous couple of people in the Bible. 1 Samuel 18. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Verse 3. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, even his sword and his bow and his belt. So there's that word, covenant. And based on this passage, why was Jonathan a good friend? Okay, talk about that. I'll give you guys 1 minute. Go. All right. So you might have said things like loved him as his own soul, or like he gave him his best, gave him all these different things, okay? So who is Jonathan and who is David, and what is so special about their covenant, all right? And so it's time for, this is the one thing that I wanted sound for. Okay, we got to do that one more time. All right, flashback alert, okay? So where do we meet Jonathan? What can we learn about him? We first meet him in 1 Samuel 13. Also, all of this is on your little program thing, by the way, but I'll have it up here too. The context is Jonathan and his dad, King Saul. It's the first king of Israel. That's King Saul. And they're engaged in conflict with the Philistines, who are the bad guys. And guess what? They're losing. So in chapter 13, verse 5, it says that there were 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and troops like the sand on the seashore in multitude. Versus, guess how many Israelites? 600, okay? So the Israelites, they're scared. And they're hiding in wells, cisterns, and caves, and they're terrified. But then Jonathan does something that really captures who he is. He says to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." So he's saying to this younger bro, hey, I know that it's going to be overwhelming and scary and it's terrifying, but let's go to that outpost. Let's just try something. And nothing can hinder the Lord from saving. And if he wants to save, man, it could be with an army or it could just be with the two of us. So let's just go and try. And we might just open up how God wants to work. So then they go and try to make it happen. And the armor bearer has this amazing response. He says, "Do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul." Man, let's go and try and do outreach, like at a nearby campus. RCC, CSUSB. Let's go someplace like that, Pomona. Hey, what if we got together with some of our friends and I know we're just college students, but what if we went to this other place and we started to plant a church and we did that together? And wow, that would be amazing. So turn to the person next to you, say the armor bearer's words. Okay, ready and go. Yeah, amen. Yeah, oh yeah, let's do it, all right? Let's do it. So it's kind of like this picture. They have a moment, right? It's nice. And everyone is full of fear and running away. But what does Jonathan do? He pulls people towards faith in God and just try something. that opens up God into the action. And this is often how God works. He's waiting for a group of people who are willing to step up and take action. And then what happens? Well, we're just kind of zooming through the Old Testament now, right? Okay, so there's a battle, there's an earthquake, and then the Philistines are routed, okay? So that's what happens. So who is Jonathan? Jonathan is this awesome man of valor, skill, and faith. Then what happens? David comes along. Who's David? He's 4 years younger than Jonathan, and he is the youngest of 8, and he's a sheep herder. He has no military experience, and we now fast forward to another battle. So you got to read the Old Testament, because Old Testament, man, is exciting stuff, more exciting than, I think a lot of movies are probably based off it, right? So they fight this guy named Goliath. He is the champion. He's like, really tall, and he's been taunting the Israelites day after day, week after week, and he's basically saying, hey, are there any real men in this room? No? None of you are real men? And that's basically what he says, give me a man. And he's doing that for 40 days. No one stands up. No one faces him. And not even Jonathan and Saul. They don't respond either. So everyone is dismayed and greatly afraid. And David hears these taunts. He comes along, not only challenges Goliath, but then he defeats him. And Goliath, who is he like? He is like that jar that no one can open, okay? David is like the freshman who comes along and just like opens it, right? And what do you say to someone younger who you think is kind of lesser and below you, who does something that you can't do? Like, I loosened it for you, right? And you try to like minimize, and you try to criticize or put down. Why? Because you're afraid that that might make you obsolete. And David is like the latest version in faith, leading to God taking action, which means Jonathan is now outdated. So how do you respond when someone better comes along, who can do all the things that you've been trying to do, but better? Jonathan has this awesome response. He says, I love you, man. And he makes a covenant, all right? And it must have happened just like this, right? Just like this picture. So the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. Soul knitting. Anybody ever watch Pacific Rim? They're like Jaeger pilots drifting their consciousness, their subconscious, right? And Jonathan and David experience interwoven soul melding. And rather than being intimidated or fearful of David, Jonathan responds in love. His heart goes out to David. They become something like blood brothers. So they make a covenant. Why is it hard for us to make covenants, long-term commitments? I think because life, it is uncertain. We're not sure about the future. We're not sure about like 10 years from now. We're not sure about like even a week from now. What's going to happen? Who's going to be around? We don't know what the other person will be like and what will even be like. We're trying to figure all of that out ourselves. So we avoid committing to other people or the thing that we could have together because it seems better to just trust ourselves more than we trust other people. When we do that, what we do is we end up favoring what is convenient for us in the short term. Relationships can become something based on need. So we have like things like sports buddies, right? Because you can't play basketball by yourself. So you have to get together with some guys to play basketball or whatever it is. We have housing buddies, right? Because man, it costs a lot for you to pay for rent all by yourself. And it is a bit crude, but the mantra that we often live by is you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. So as long as you have something to scratch me with, okay, we could be together. Our relationships end up being very functional. Okay, they end up becoming like maybe lab mates or like coworkers. And we have to coexist though, so we try to make that interaction as pleasant as possible. So, we'll laugh, we'll exchange pleasantries, we'll be nice to each other because we want to make it best for each of us. But then our relationships, they end up being like meeting people at airport terminals, right? So they become just temporary based on personal convenience. And you don't invest too much in someone you meet at the airport terminal because when you say goodbye, that might be it. You might not see them again. Because, you go your ways. They go theirs. What if Jonathan responded that way? Okay, what if Jonathan responded that way? What if he responded how we typically expect someone to respond when someone better comes along with that kind of distance or just that barrier? And what would that be like? What would Jonathan in an alternate universe be like? Okay, and we actually don't have to imagine that all too hard because that is actually a description of what happened with Jonathan's dad, King Saul. Saul was God's original chosen one. And because he broke covenant with God and started doing things his own way, God moved on and chose David. So at first, Saul was totally for David, okay? They were really close. Against all odds, David does this thing where he defeats Goliath, and that was good for Saul and for his army and for his people. And he kept winning too. So you have this in your hand, but we have it up here too. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. So that Saul sent him over the men of war. So he's like a commander now. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So everyone liked him. And man, he was a brilliant musician too. For Saul, he would play Saul personally, play for him. David was Saul's own man, and he eventually became his son-in-law. That's how close they were. But then this happened. Verse 6. As they're coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. They're throwing a parade for him, okay? And after all of David's exploits, the women, they all start singing this. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s, all right? So how does Saul respond? Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, to me they have ascribed thousands, and what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on. Turn to the person next to you and eye them. Exactly, it must have been like that, right? Okay? So Saul starts getting jealous and angry to the point where he tries to kill him and drive him out. Turns out that relationship, it was really conditional. Conditions, as long as people think that, don't think that you're better than me. As long as that's not the case, I'll support you. But if you ever get better than me, I can't take that. And Saul starts going crazy. And he thinks that David was out to get Saul's throne and out to get him. So Saul says, you know what, I'm going to get you first. And so Saul, what kind of friend was he? He was a fair weather friend. When it served Saul, he could relate to David, but as soon as it was not ideal for Saul and his ego, that relationship went out the door. So it's nice when you have someone to go to the dining hall with, right? So you don't have to eat alone. But as soon as people maybe start noticing that they look better, they get the compliment for whatever it is, how do you respond? Gym buddies, man, it's nice, right? Until they play on the other team. And then they start trash talking your team and you, and then they beat you. Oh man. Then they get the eye, right? They get the eye. So in contrast, we have Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan should have been scared of David because Jonathan was Saul's son and heir to the throne. And the more awesome that David gets, the more of a threat David was to Jonathan's ascension to the throne. But Jonathan gives him his robe, which represents his royal position. And he gives him his very best, the weapons, the belt. And Jonathan is recognizing that there goes the Lord's anointed. That's where it is. And he doesn't hold back so that he could establish David. And he gives him the highest praise. And this foreshadows what Jonathan is going to do later, which is to stand up for David, even to his father, and even yield his throne to David. And he does that in chapter 23. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. He was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horish, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horish and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horish, and Jonathan went home. Jonathan is not just an awesome man of God, but he's an awesome friend. You know, imagine just turning to the person next to you and go like, you're going to be king. You're going to be awesome. And then make a covenant. Bam. That's what they do, all right? And he has this unconditional commitment to the other guy through thick and thin, sickness and health, till death do us part. That's a commitment. Not just when David is awesome, but even when David is a fugitive, when he's on the run, when his own dad is out to get him. And this partnership leads not to just to David's blessing, but it leads to God's honor being displayed as Jonathan plays this very pivotal role in establishing God's kingdom. So that is unconditional. That's what it looks like. And that is covenant, and that's what it looks like. And that should be beautiful. That should be inspiring. Like when you have bros who are willing to do things together with you, no matter what happens, that is a beautiful thing. Man, you can get stuck on the side of the road, your car can explode, but if you're with friends, man, it is okay. It's an adventure. You can lose your job. Your relationship, right? Significant other, that might not work out. Your attempt at trying something scary for God, maybe it can fail miserably. But if you've got friends, it's okay. Life is that adventure. Will you tackle that adventure like Jonathan or like Saul? Will you make commitments to people for the long haul? Or will you be governed by your own convenience when things suit you or not suit you? Will your relationships be ones of covenant or conditional convenience? You know, covenant, what it requires letting go of what is convenient for you in terms of time, in terms of schedule, even your future plans. Like you can't have your way all the time. Jonathan, he lets go of like the kingship. He was a prince. He forgoes that. You know, Jonathan did that and he decreased. And he would eventually lose it all and give up all. And isn't that what Jesus does? He would be stripped of his robes, give up all, giving his very life even, so he could clothe us in new robes, so that we would have nobility, we would have status. Jonathan does the move of Jesus. Should we not follow? How do you need to decrease? What are the ways in which you need to let go of individual wants or desires or plans? And you look at all this, and you might think, man, is this all worth it? Should I even do this? And I just want to tell a story about one of my friends. This is Joe, all right? This is, we took a picture here last year at the Exponential Conference. We're there together. He is someone I met my freshman year, okay? And so we were at the we were outside Unit 3. We met each other at Dave Wu's, he's in Maryland, in the back of his Camry. And we got in the car, and he was like, hey, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from New York. No way, I'm from New Jersey. Both from the East Coast? Yeah, boom. And then after that, boom, a motorcycle hits our car. And, you know, so our first meeting, it was a hit, right? So anyways, that's what happened. And since then, we got like a lot closer. And we actually lived together for 3 years when we were single and stuff. And he is this tall, athletic Korean male, all right? He currently leads our church in Irvine, by the way, so you might see him around. Okay, so he is the one who could not only open up all the jars that everyone could open, but he could reach all the jars that no one else could reach. Okay, he's that kind of guy, and he is smart too. He worked at Apple. He kept declining promotions to managerial positions because he wanted to be more available for ministry. So in like just many, many different ways, he was the perfect man, except he had one weakness, okay? His thumbs look like toes, okay? So I got him there, right? And so I used to see him as competition, right? And I used to have a lot of disagreements with him, and I used to feel like he doesn't understand me because he's like a programmer, engineer. I'm like a liberal arts kind of guy, and so theater. And so I just would, I would sometimes feel threatened by him, and I would feel distance from him. But I think as I matured and as we started to grow closer to God, as the Bible's vision of sharing the gospel to the nations became our vision, and as I started to care more about God's honor than my own ego, what actually happened? And Joe, he stopped being competition to me, you know? And we became co-laborers. As we moved closer to God, we also moved closer to each other. And he stopped being a threat. And I started seeing that we're all on the same side. And that enabled me to focus on growing in my own strengths and weaknesses rather than constantly measuring myself to him or to other people. So I started to decrease. What did that look like? Man, I remember my sophomore and my junior year, we're living together. And oftentimes, I wanted to be a homemaker and stuff. And so there's dishes. They're not mine. They're his. I would do it. I would decrease. All right? Challenge to all you guys out there. And so I would cook food for him. Taught him to make a lot of Korean dishes. So I got him there, right? Teaching him his own food. And I took on a lot of burdens, I think, later on in life. And that comes down to practical things. Covering for him when he would get sick, or, sometimes he'd be late for things because he has 3 kids, twins, and so those girls' stuff would happen, and so he'd be late, and I'd cover for him. And rather than go like, oh man, I'm doing so much, I'm doing more, I'm covering for you, like I would just do it for him because, man, he's got important things to do too, and just decrease to make him better. And I think the biggest thing, though, was just sticking around after we graduated. And what that looked like is, I wanted to serve God, and man, I was going like, oh wow, people are really serving God here. And so I just wanted to stay with that. And he saw that too, and he stuck around too, and eventually just committing to God and his people here. And we actually, we grew closer as we were pursuing God's mission together. And that is what enabled us to actually build up the Boston church together. We went out there a couple years ago. This is us with Jackie and Irene, and then Pastor Manny and Sunny. And so we went there. Back there is the downtown Boston. You can't see it, but in front of us is MIT, and that's the Charles River. And so we're there scouting it out before the 90 people came. And so we all moved out there. And man, there was a lot of joy and strength in doing this challenging thing together. I don't think if we didn't have that kind of bond that we established earlier on, I don't know if I definitely would not have been able to do that. 90 people, that was insane. And but to do this crazy thing together, and just want to show a picture of what it was like when we left. Okay, so here's some life group in my house and the international group, and that's our Sunday service. So that's when I left about like a year ago. And actually, if you check out Reclaimer on IG, it's kind of really big. They're in a middle of a East Coast, Northeast retreat right now in Connecticut. From all different groups from Northeast are going, 21 colleges, all right? And so, man, when you commit yourself to God, and so does your friend, you draw closer despite your differences. When you commit to each other, you're able to do powerful things. That has to be there. That's the base. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to amount to much. You know that. So who might God be calling you to draw closer to if you humble yourself like Jonathan did? And who are some unexpected people that you might start to see as being on the same side? Could they even be here in this room? Perhaps. Don't assume you know everything about the other person or even about yourself or the situation or the relationship and write people off. So, some practical tips, okay? How do we do that? What does it look like? And I want to just name a few things. We have to just move towards it, okay? And actually call it for what it is. And in 2 weeks, we're going to start something called life groups, okay? So those are just smaller groups where you can actually start building into these things with people. We're trying to get, people who are most like you. So it would be like the freshman bros, right? So something like that. And just want to qualify, okay, that this is an important thing. Not all closeness, not all intimacy is sexual, okay? So that is the way that I think Satan has twisted things so that all intimacy, when we say, hey, bros, you got to get close, they're like, oh, all they can think of is the sexual, right? So we look at Jonathan's love, and all we can think of is sexual. And I'm looking up all these just very familiar things out there. They say Frodo and Sam, their relationship, they must have been gay, right? Gimli and Legolas, it must have been like that, because the world can't imagine people who are so intimate and close, but it's totally platonic. They can't imagine that. So that's why on Joe's birthday, his 40th birthday, in a public setting, I said, I love you. And it was the most awkward, kind of goosebumpy, heartfelt public expression that I have ever done, but I did it, and I'm never doing it again, all right? So, do not turn to people next to you and say, I love you, okay? But maybe, yeah, don't do that. All right, so maybe, okay, it would be good to create, to get into life groups. Groups in which, you're able to actually get closer and move towards covenant relationship. You don't have to commit for the long haul right from the beginning, okay? But it would be good to actually move towards that, okay? Because if you want to do anything substantial, right, you got to start with some short-term commitments, right? So at least commit for I don't know, this year or for college. You cannot be just hopping around to all different places. And that's just a tragedy that we see out here in what people call Christendom, the church world, where people, they just do what they call church hopping. And it's kind of it's a consumerist mentality where, yeah, I like my donuts here, I like the singing here, I like the preaching here, I like the people here. And you can't do anything significant if you don't commit to a group of people, all right? So just make short-term commitments, okay, to move towards long-term ones. So maybe it's just college, right? Or maybe it's just, this year. And the sophomores, right? The sophomores, you guys are ripening now, right? You're getting closer. And it took some time, right? And at first you weren't I'm here forever. No, it's just okay, I'll just check it out. And then at a certain point you're no, I think I want to be here, at least for college. And now you're actually able to kind of get closer. Those are the ingredients that are necessary. The new grad bros, right? They are now leveling up. I see it. I see that they're leveling up because they're always complaining about how tired they are. And I'm yes, finally, they're doing something worthwhile with their life and their time. And it took a little longer for them because, man, their first year was COVID, right? They're all shelter in place. But man, they are really getting close now. And if you want to do something really substantial stuff with your life, you got to commit for 40 years, right? It's got to be for the long haul. And we know that. But it's totally fine to wait on that. You don't have to do that right now. That would be weird if you did that right now, okay? Eventually, this is what happens. David, he is able, because they're committed for the long haul, he's able to return the favor to Jonathan's family. And this is a whole other story, but it is a story of Mephibosheth, and it's a story in which the gospel is displayed. And maybe I'll talk about that some other time. But the point is, the longer the commitment, the more powerful it is, so that you can move towards this very good word in the Bible, faithfulness, all right? Isn't that what we should want? To be faithful? So last thing, last kind of tip, and I think this is a spicy tip, all right? And so I'm all about the spice. And so feel free to ask me about this later. And maybe I need to should I talk about this more in depth later? I don't know. All right, so covenant friendship is not marriage, all right? So some people like to say, there's that icebreaker question. People asked in the car, if you could teach a class on anything, what would it be? And people were for you, would it be dating and marriage? And I'm I guess. I'm getting sick of that because I talk about it so much. But covenant friendship is not marriage, okay? So I'm going to show you this table from the book Made for People, which is, guess what? We based our series off of that book. So it's a good book, okay? But this is the table. And I'm just going to talk through it because I don't know if you could see that in the back. So there's 3 columns: acquaintance or companion, then covenant friendship, then marriage, okay? And in general, we want to move towards covenant friendship and definitely away from just living in the acquaintance or companion section. Acquaintance or companion, either sex. Covenant friendship, usually same sex. Marriage, man and woman. Acquaintance or companion, no vulnerability. You move towards strictly emotional vulnerability. And in the marriage relationship, it's emotional and sexual vulnerability, but it's just with one person. Acquaintance or companion, no commitment. Covenant, move towards covenant. Marriage, complete and lifelong covenant. A completely inclusive, balances exclusive and inclusive, completely exclusive. Expects no sacrifice, expects significant sacrifice, expects lifelong sacrifice. You may gain something from the relationship. Covenant, friendship, marriage, the gain is the relationship itself. Okay? So I think there actually is some things to think about from this, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but friendship, it drives towards relational intimacy, which means disclosure of true selves. So friendship, then, is more universal because not everyone will be married, all right? And you won't be married to everyone, right? So it's more universal. But everyone, I think, should look for a few covenant friends. You got to have that. And I know that a lot of you are interested in dating and marriage, as you should be, right? But the author makes this case, every married person needs covenant friendships outside of marriage. The challenging question is, how are you doing on that? Because if you don't have that, you're actually in big trouble. Even if you get that column, you need this column as well. And the best time to invest in that is actually before you get into that column. So we got to move towards covenant friendships. And if you want to do anything compelling, we can't just be this loose conglomeration of acquaintances that are free to move around however we choose. There has to be some level of commitment. And so we think that actually by default, the picture that we're going for is this. And that's what a lot of people have in mind. Like, I want to move towards this picture, right? But the church is not composed of holy huddles, all right? But it's composed of what looks more like this. Open circles, right? And it should look more like this. And like it's an open circle so that other people can actually come into it. And if you don't have a church that you're covenanted to, like you actually can't accomplish that much. So this is the pattern, and this is the goal of God. 1 John 1, that which we have seen and heard we proclaim also to you, so that you too may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. And we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete. So the goal, right, is that we would actually have fellowship with each other. And that's what God is able to have. Remember the Trinitarian bash, right? He actually wants to invite us into that big open circle. And what will heaven be like? Heaven will be like where we keep inviting more people in. It's not a closed circle, all right? And so what is that goal? The goal is it's going to be awesome. That's where joy is. That's where you experience it. And the question is, do you want to join? You know, we've been doing a lot of fun things, right? And the fun that we do, it's not just based on fun with each other. It's based on this principle. Like, we want this more and more. And I think every Christian, that's what you should want to be part of as well, and to join in on that. So I said a lot of challenging things, okay? And what I want to do right now is just pause. Identify a point that hit you. Write down an application of that point. Maybe you could reference the verse. So just kind of remember, where did you get that from? Where did I talk about that? So that you're not just sharing about anything random, right? And then kind of solidify by talking about that with people. Okay, so I talked about a lot. People next to you, why don't you guys do this for 2 minutes? After that, we're going to sing some songs and pray and kind of respond in that way. But let's do this for 2 minutes, okay? I want to share this passage, okay? This is about Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. So, Jonathan follows after Jesus' pattern, his example. He gives all. And on the cross, what we see is the lowering, the servant-like nature of God, who would actually become obedient to the point of death. And so we see covenantal love because he gives all. And that is what enables us to be able to do the hard thing of being faithful to the end and being covenantal. So on the cross, we see covenantal love. And how do you need to give it all like Jesus? So as we consider the fact that he was faithful, that gives us the ability to do the hard thing of, saying like, okay, maybe I will just commit to this for now and figure out how I can move towards covenant and do something substantial and meaningful and powerful for God. And man, it used to be the case that groups of college students, they would dream dreams of what they would do for God. Or they would go, you know what? When I graduate, me and my friends, we want to go in foreign missions. We want to actually plant a church. We want to actually spark revival. That's actually what sparked the revivals and a lot of the mission movements that we've heard about, but it's been a while. But could it start here? I think it can.